Ladies and gentlemen, coaches, fans alike, we are back for NPBF. This is D-League Season 13. My name is Jeff. I am the head commissioner of the NPBF and the coach of the Rage Fist Annihilates up in the main league. But for right now, we are focusing entirely on our D-League 13 seasons of this feeder league, bringing new faces, new talented, amazing players up to the main league, as well as helping foster a whole new generation of great players who are learning and growing each and every season. It has been truly fantastic to watch and see. It's an exciting place to be. And I'm really, really happy that we're going to be able to get back into content this season so I can really get to witness the greatness that is our D-League coach roster. I am running solo this time. Going forward with recaps and stuff, I will make it a point to not do that, just because it makes it better to have multiple opinions going on, but just because of scheduling and whatnot and trying to get this out in time for week 1, I gotta run solo this evening, so I'm going to be going over the drafts for Season 13 of the D-League. I'm just going to try to go through each one pretty quickly. I'm going to try to speed run this one a little bit. But just giving my opinions on each of the drafts, and I'll give them a little bit of a rough grade to kind of, give them an idea of like where they're sitting, in my opinion. So this season, for Season 13 of D-League, as well as Season 20 of Main League, we are doing a Paldea Dex draft, plus both DLCs. So everything that is available within Scarlet and Violet as of the release of the Indigo Disc DLC was available for drafting. So that is pretty awesome. A lot of good stuff involved there, which is great. And, a lot of mons got buffed. A lot of re-tier had to be done. And speaking of which, we ended up going with a tier system again instead of a point system. And it's something that we're still toying with, potentially alternating back and forth between the two, see which one people like the most. Just kind of going off of there. Personally, I prefer points, because I feel like you can distribute mons to where they more adequately belong, cost-wise, but a lot of people seemed to not like the points last season, so we give the people what they want. You guys wanted tiers. We came back with tiers. We switched things up a little bit this season. We went with a 6-tier style instead of this traditional 5 tiers. This way we can kind of take things and spread them out a little bit more. Make tier 1 almost kind of like an S tier kind of situation, where like the best of the best of the best, and you can kind of get one of those and build around that. The structure for this season was just a straight up 1 mon from tier 1, and then you get 2 picks from all the other tiers. So 2 tier 2s, 2 tier 3s, 2 tier 4s, etc., etc. We also stuck with our low-tier Terra rules, where you can only select mons from tier 5 and 6 to be Terra captains, and then you could select 3 Terra types for those mons. And those Terra types could be, had to be 1 stab typing, and then the other 2 could be any other typing that you choose. So some interesting combinations were made. Very, very cool stuff. Without further ado, let us go ahead and get into these rosters. Starting things off, we have Nate and his Baltimore Predacons. Nate is hanging out here down in D-League. He's come back for this season to hopefully run it back and see if he can make his way back up to main. His draft consists of Iron Valiant, Corviknight, Keldeo, Crocodile, Haxorus, Rotom Heat, Gallade, Whimsicott, Mismagius, Alolan Dugtrio, and Slaking. His Terra captains are the Mismagius and the Alolan Doug trio. Mismagius is rocking the Ghost, Electric, and Normal typings, and Doug trio is rocking out with Steel, Flying, and Ghost. So, very, very interesting draft here. One thing I note immediately is not a lot of designated bulk present here. Like, there are some mons that are like, that have a little bit of natural bulk, natural bulk. I believe Keldeo can be run a little bulky. Crocodile can be run a little bulky with Intimidate. Rotom Heath is probably going to have to be bulky more often. And, like, Corviknight's a bulk beast. But, like, this team gives me more of a heavily offensive vibe. A lot of really strong hitters. A lot of potential setup sweepers. You know, with, like, Calm Mind Keldeo, Calm Mind or SD Valiant. Dragon Dance Haxorus, SD Gallade, Nasty Plot Mismagius, all types of things like that. I can very much see this being a heavily offensive team. This is looking like something that's just going to come out, hit hard, hit fast, try to set up and sweep through you, and hopefully not have to take too many hits and just kind of pressure you early on with heavy offense is what I'm kind of gathering from this team. Fairy Dragon Steel Core, he has a little bit of overlap here with two different fairy options to use between the Whimsicott and the Valiant, but he also has he has the Corviknight and the Haxorus as his core here. He also has the overlap with the Doug Trio for the Steel Core, so not ideal, but it is what it is. His Firewater Grass core is looking like the Rotom Heat, Whimsicott, and the Keldeo, which is a pretty solid core, not too bad. He's got some good flip turn, U-turn momentum with things like the Corviknight, the Keldeo, the Rotom Heat, Whimsicott. You know, getting a decent little bit of momentum to bounce around with. Not too much, but you know, it's pretty solid. Corviknight is looking like his main form of removal. I'm not 100% certain if Whimsicott still has access to defog or not. I do not remember off the top of my head. Let me double check that really quickly. I'm going to have a lot of tabs open on my phone as like a way to check things. So I apologize for any little brief breaks in the action for y'all. Let's set this to that. It does not look like Whimsicott still has defog, which is very, very unfortunate. So that is not going to be getting him much of anywhere, unfortunately. So, Corviknight being his only defogger is something that can potentially be dangerous for him. If he gets hazard stacked, he's not going to be able to do too much about it. So maybe trying to find an alternate mon for hazard removal as a secondary mon for it, I think would be a pretty solid plan for him. Overall, this team is fine. I can see it doing a lot of work. I can see a lot of the thought processes here. The Terra types, I can't really have. I don't have any fault on the Terra types. You know, Ghost obviously had to be, but Electric with giving it no weaknesses thanks to Levitate, and then Normal kind of giving it an immunity to the Ghost moves that are going to be coming at it from the super effective standpoint. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then for Doug Trio, Steel is just the better, I think, Terra type from an offensive and defensive standpoint. For Doug Trio, I think just the Iron Heads need to hit a little bit harder than the Earthquakes sometimes. Makes sense. Plus, Steel just has more resistances, so taking away the weaknesses from the ground typing makes sense. Flying to get away from ground type attacks coming its way, and then Ghost to dodge potential fighting types in the future. All makes a lot of sense to me. I think that the Terra types are fine. I think overall this is just like a very middle of the road team. I can see what he was going for, and I can see like kind of like the theory behind it, but overall, I think this team is like a solid C. It has room to improve, but I can see, like, I'm sure there's going to be a matchup or two here or there where, like, he's going to face some people that might be a little bit less experienced, where he might be able to get off a cheeky sweep, or just, like, pressure someone too much that they can't really get over it. So, overall, interesting roster to start with. Next up, we have a newcomer to D-League this season, in Michaela with her Florida Flaffy. I do not remember how Michaela ended up joining. I believe, I could be wrong, she was a friend of someone already a part of the league, I believe. She was a friend of Greg's, if I remember correctly. I do not remember off the top of my head, but I remember she's either a friend of Greg's or a friend of Alan's, one or the other, that they ended up coming in because we had an extra spot open, which, very, very cool of her to come join, and I hope that she is going to have a good time. Her roster consists of the Dragapult, Mew, Heatran, Iron Jugulus, Blastoise, Galvantula, Hisuian Decidueye, Knacklestack, Darkspun, Hisuian Avalugg, and Muck. So this team is looking pretty balanced from first look. Just so you know, like, this is the first I've looked at any of the rosters for either league. So this all, like, fresh blind reactions to all of it, which is, I think, makes it more exciting. So, Fairy Dragon Steel Core, we're looking at the Dragapult, Heatran, and Darkspun, which I actually think is really, really solid. 2 fire immunities in there as well, which is really, really interesting. For that core, I think I really, really like that. They can help defend, like, the Decidueye and the Galvantula really, really well. Very, very cool stuff. And we have the Fire Water Grass with the Heatran, Blastoise, and Decidueye. Very, 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 very solid cores. Going for more like the bulky, water, balanced fire / like more offensive grass route. I kind of like that. I'm very interested to see Hisuian Decidueye do some work. I haven't personally gotten to use it myself, but I'm very excited to see what it can do, because it's a mon that is very intriguing to me. Her Terra Captains are the Knacklestack with Rock, Ghost, and Ground, and Avalugg Hisui with Ice, Ghost, and Ground. So very interesting to see Ground on both of those. I'm not entirely certain on what the logic is on that. I think that the third type could probably be something a little bit better. I could maybe see, like, probably like a Fairy being really good on Knacklestack. Fairy or Water being good. I think Fairy probably just because, like, it helps with, like, fighting types and such. But Ghost kind of does a lot of that as well. For Avalugg, I would think, like, fighting. So you can get, like, the boosts on body presses with this thing, because body pressing is something that it really likes to do. So I think maybe that's something that I would personally change. But this team is very, very solid. It's got some really, really strong offensive options, with the Pult being one of the best draft mons there is, with, like, Iron Jugulus being just incredibly strong. We are allowing booster energy this season as well, so this thing having access to booster is going to be really interesting. Mew can do literally anything, so it's just a plug-and-play mon each week. Having access to webs with the Galvantula is going to be really, really pressuring for a lot of teams if they're lacking in hazard removal. Galvantula is going to apply a lot of pressure just by being on the roster, which I think is really great. I know Hisuian Decidueye has defog. I'm like 99% sure. Yes, it does have defog. So she's got Spin with Blastoise, she's got defog with Decidueye, which are both really good. And I believe, and Hisuian Avalugg also can spin, which is great. So she's got some good hazard removal going here. Some good hazard setters as well. Knacklestack can do it, Avalugg can do it. Webs from Galvantula, Heatran can set rocks. Mew can probably set whatever hazard it wants to. Muck now gets toxic spikes. Like, she's got a really, really well-balanced team. This team's looking very, very defensive, but with a good bit of balance. I am seeing a little bit of a ground weakness. Muck, Avalugg, Knacklestack, Heatran, all weak to ground, and your only real resist/immunities are the Jugulus and the Decidueye. Decidueye being the best one, I would say, just because of the fact that the Decidueye is also not weak to, like, the Edgequake combo itself. So, like, you know, typically when strong ground moves are coming out, there's also a rock move to back it up. So Jug isn't the safest on it, but I think right now, like, that's like, if that's like my biggest complaint, I don't really think that that's too bad. So I think this team, honestly, this team feels like a solid A-. Honestly, I'm feeling really good vibes from this team. I just think I see a lot of good things I like. I see a lot of things that are gonna, I think, work out really, really well for her. This is a really, really solid roster. Really, really well done, Michaela. I'm very interested to see how this roster works out. Moving on, we have the Golden State Wartortles, coached by Angel. Angel's been a part of D-League for a while now. Good to see Angel's sticking around and having a good time. I really like the people that have been sticking with us for a while. I always love people who just keep coming back. And his team's looking pretty scary. He's got the Chi-Yu, Quavel, Raging Bolt, Breloom, Necrozma, Klefki, Torterra, Crocolore, Lycanroc, Midday, Ariados, and the Wartortle. His Terra captains are Crocolore with Fire, Ghost, and Fairy, and Wartortle with Water, Fairy, and Grass. So, a couple things right off the bat. Obviously, I'm seeing a bunch of, couple bits of type overlap here that I'm not really understanding the reason for. We have double Grass with Breloom, Torterra, double Water with Quavel and Wartortle, and double Fire with Chi-Yu and Crocolore. Just, this is a quickest look at it. Those are the ones that I noticed immediately, so it kind of feels like a bit excessive. Not really sure what the thought process was there. While they do kind of fit different roles, it still kind of feels like, why? Like, there's no real purpose to it. Like, I think the lower tier ones could have been something else that could probably fit better utility-wise onto the team, in my opinion. Honestly, I think, like, I would personally swap Breloom instead of Torterra, though. I think Torterra adding the ground typing is really good for the team. But I think Breloom being a second fighting type alongside Quavel is just kind of, like, not really worth it for what Breloom does bring to the table, in my personal opinion. I also don't think Breloom's that great, in draft at least. But that's just me. Raging Bolt's really, really good mon to have. One of the newer additions to the tiers this season. Very, very solid with that priority Thunderclap Sucker Punch-ish like move that it has, which is really cool. Klefki for screens and spikes and stuff is going to be very annoying for people to deal with. I could see a lot of scenarios where he just sets up hazards between the Klefki and the Ariados' webs, and then just kind of tries to set up screens and let something like Quavel just kind of set up and sweep, or like Chi-Yu just setting up and sweeping. This team feels very top heavy. Like, this top, like, 6, I feel is going to come more often than not. It's like, there's just a lot of scenarios where I don't see a reason for, like, bringing the 2 Terra captains. I mean, like, Crocolore doesn't really add a lot to the team, I feel. it can be a little annoying, but I don't really think it adds too much. And Wartortle, it's a somewhat bulky water type that can spin, but like Quaquaval has spin, and it's decently bulky, but it also has the ability to sweep on top of it, and Wartortle doesn't really have that. Yes, it can Shell Smash now, but like it's a Wartortle. It's not particularly strong. So I feel like this team is very jumbled. It has some strong elements. It has some very solid elements that I feel, if played and paired correctly, the Klefki with things like Raging Bolt, Quaquaval, Chi-Yu, can all be very threatening. But I think that this team definitely has a lot of room to improve. I'm just not really... I'm feeling like there's just a lot of overlapping typings, a lot of overlapping weaknesses that I think are easy to exploit here. This is probably more on like the side of like a C-. Like calling this a C-, I would actually probably bump Nate's team up to like a B-, because I can at least see a lot of what the thought process is here. I'm not really understanding the thought process here as much. I'm not really getting, like, Klefki, Raging Bolt, Quaquaval, and Chi-Yu. Like, that combination feels right. Necrozma feels right there. Torterra feels right there. And it just kind of feels like the rest of it's just kind of like... It's not even glue trying to hold the team together. It's like... We're trying to stick it together with old tape. It's just kind of not as sticky and it's kind of falling apart. Cheap dollar store stickers. Yeah, C- for this one, I think. I'm just not really feeling a lot of what this team's given off vibe-wise for me. I'm just not really feeling this team. I see a lot of holes. I see a lot of ways this team can be exploited. And I feel like it could go really poorly for him if he doesn't like make some changes or really play out of his mind, honestly. And then the last member of the Bolt division here, the divisions are named after the newest Paradox Mons. Bolt, Boulder, Fire, and Crown. So, that makes sense. We have the final member of the Bolt division, who is a former main league coach who got knocked down, and a member of the commission team. We have James and his Myrtle Magikarps down in D-League. He ended up getting knocked down. His late season come-up did not go as well as it typically does last season, so he ended up falling down here. And here he is with the roster of Iron Boulder, Skeledirge, King Gambit, Gyarados, of course, Hippowdon, Gastrodon, Gardevoir, Chansey, Alomomola, Altaria, and Charjabug. His Terra Captains are the Alomomola with the Water, Ghost, and Poison typings, and Altaria with the Flying, Fairy, and Steel typings. I really like this team. He's missing a base. He's got Fairy Dragon Steel. He's got King Gambit. He's got the Gardevoir, and he has the Altaria. Altaria with Terra is actually really solid. It has a lot of options with like potential Perish Trap, just being naturally bulky, and with Terra it can end up hitting pretty hard. It's a really solid mon, really annoying mon. His Firewater Grass is where it kind of falls apart for me. He is missing a grass type entirely, but he has 3 water types with Alomomola, Gastrodon, and Gyarados to pair with his Skeledirge. I think a water type or a grass type would be really nice for this team. Just a solid, bulky grass type to kind of pair in there. Personal opinion. The Hippowdon's very interesting. I can see a lot of scenarios where having sand could be very good. Getting extra chip damage while Gastrodon's in front of stuff. Getting Well, King Gambit sitting in front of things, giving a Spadef boost to Iron Boulder because that's one of his lowest stats, which is also really good. Iron Boulder is really, really solid mon, just like a solid, strong attacker. It just hits like a truck, and I feel like you can put in a lot of work here. A bunch of type overlap, double psychic, double ground, the triple water that we mentioned. I can potentially see that being an issue, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Lacking the grass type kind of hurts, in my opinion. I think it would help a lot with his, not just his type diversity, but I think it would help, solidly defensively for this team. Skeledirge is a really, really solid mon, though. I think that's going to help out a lot with this team. The Unaware from the Skeledirge is going to keep this team held together. Chansey as well, very, very bulky mon for him to utilize. I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how he utilizes the Chansey. Altaria gets defog. Altaria still gets defog. I'm like 99% sure on that. But I think that's it for as far as removal goes. He does have the webs with Charge-a-Bug. He's got Chansey, I believe, can still set up rocks. Gastrodon can do rocks, and I believe it can do spikes now. Hippowdon can do rocks. So he's got a lot of things that can set up hazards. His removal of hazards is going to be a little bit iffier. This team is very, very fat. And I think, truthfully, I think it's probably designed to wear the opponent down as much as possible, pass wishes, some fat wishes around with a Alomomola or Chansey, into things like the Iron Boulder, into things like the Skeledirge, into things like the Gyarados, so that they can set up and just kind of clean up the game from there. So I can see the strategy in mind. I'm not a particular fan of it. Like, taking the player out of it and knowing how well you can utilize a strategy like this. I do believe that there is room to improve with this roster. So I think this is still a C team. I can see kind of what he's going for, but I'm not really feeling it. I think that there's a few changes that could be made to improve it. So hopefully either he makes those changes or this team just proves me completely wrong and pops the heck off. We'll see. But that is it for the Bolt division. Moving on now down to the Boulder division. We are starting things off with the New York Applins, who are coached by Dylan. I believe Dylan is new, if I remember correctly. I believe Dylan is fairly new. I believe he's a friend of Alex's, off the top of my head. I'm not entirely sure, but I do believe that is the case. And he drafted a team of Baxcalibur, Alolan Ninetales, Tinglu, Ceruledge, Toxapex, Incineroar, Galarian Slowbro, Alolan Sandslash, Dipplin, Alolan Golem, and Cramorant. A lot of regional forms on this team. Very, very cool. His Terra Captains are the Alolan Sandslash with Ice, Fairy, and Ground, and then the Alolan Golem with Electric, Normal, and Water. Interesting on the Terra Captain choices. I think typically I would expect Steel over Ice on the Sandslash, but I do understand the Ice as well to keep the defense buff from the snow. That makes total sense to me. Fairy is just a good defensive option. I can see that very, very solidly there. And Ground, I think that's just to kind of give it stab on the Earthquakes and such like that. I'm trying to think what that does for a defensive standpoint. I don't believe it does too much from a defensive standpoint, but getting that stab on the Earthquakes is really, really solid as well. Alolan Golem, Electric, I really like that. Just switch yourself down to one weakness only. It's really, really good. Takes away all of its weaknesses pretty much, which is great. Water is really good defensive typing. Takes away most of its weaknesses again. It does still keep a weakness to grass, but I'm sure matchup dependent wise, water might be better in a lot of cases. And then normal, honestly, probably just Terra Normal Explosion. I could see that being something that he could do with that. I can see some scenarios where that might be good. We'll see what he's got cooking. I'm sure he's cooking something up in his brain for that. But looking at the team as a whole, though, we do see this snow core with the Alolan Ninetales. Ninetales plus Baxcalibur has been shown to be an incredibly powerful core. The ability to get that snow up, get that defense boost on your ice types, and then get that Aurora Veil going, allowing things like Baxcalibur to set up a Dragon Dance and just kind of clean up a game pretty easily. Very, very solid stuff. Fairy Dragon Steel Core with the Baxcalibur, Alolan Ninetales, and the Alolan Sandslash, I think is very interesting that core is literally... He created a Fairy Dragon Steel Core out of his Snow Core, combined the two together. I think that's really, really cool. I'm kind of a fan of that. Just from an aesthetic standpoint, it's really fun. Fire, Water, Grass, he does have double fire with Sarah Legend and Incineroar, but they do completely different things. He's got the Toxapex, and he's got the Dipplin in there as an alternate dragon type as well. He's got double Dark with Tinglu and Incineroar. And I think that's the only other bit of overlap that I'm spotting. A double Poison with the Slowbro and the Toxapex as well. So a little bit of type overlap here and there, but from what I can tell, they don't share too many weaknesses. Big ground weakness to this team. Very, very big ground weakness. Not ideal. Also, offensively seems to lean very heavily on physical offense. Your special offense comes from like Toxapex, Ninetales, Slowbro, Dipplin. Not a lot of mons that are typically known for their offensive capabilities. So a lot of things coming in from the physical side. So a very physically bulky team could, I think, outlast this roster, or at least put up a pretty solid fight against it. I can see that scenario coming into play for them, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of aspects of this team that I do like. There's a lot of things that I can see where they were coming from or the thought process behind it. I think it's not perfect by any means. I think that there's a lot of overlap here. There's some pretty glaring weaknesses that look pretty rough for this roster to deal with. But I think overall, from an offensive standpoint, I think that needs to be very clearly notified from an offensive side. I think this team is one of the scarier teams just because of that Baxcalibur Ninetales core, because that can literally win games by itself. And with like the support of some really bulky stuff like Toxapex, Tinglu, Slowbro, I think setting up a scenario for Baxcalibur to sweep is not going to be too terribly difficult for Dylan to do. So I can see this team being dangerous. I can see this team doing well. I still think this team's like a B- at best, just because there's a lot of issues there with like type synergies across the course of the team. But overall, I think I can see this team still doing well, despite me not particularly feeling like it's constructed perfectly. So that's just my thoughts on it. I think Dylan will do fine. I think Dylan will do fine. Moving on, we have our newest commissioner and our doc god, the man who's created these amazing docs for us, the legend himself, Greg, and his Philadelphia Phanpy. He was fairly close in making his way up to main last season. He made playoffs, if I remember correctly. And unfortunately, was not able to seal the deal, so hopefully he'll be able to make his way up top soon. But and with this team, I wouldn't be too surprised if he does. He's got the Chen Pao, Galar Slowking, Hisuian Gudra, Chinchino, the Swampert, Florges, Moltres, Driftblim, Bronzong, Thwackey, and Cloth. With his Terra Captains being the Driftblim with Flying, Ground, and Steel, and Bronzong with the Psychic, Electric, and Fire. Very, very, very interesting. Very interesting, very interesting. All right. So let's break this down real quick. As far as Terra Captains go, Terra Psychic on the Bronzong over Steel for the stab, I'm not entirely sold on. I think overall, Steel's better. Boosted Gyro Balls / Heavy Slams, plus just more resistances, especially with the Levitate / Heat Proof. Like, you're removing one of Steel's typical weaknesses with either one of your abilities. So I think having Terra Steel just remove all the excess weaknesses that Psychic and Dark brings, or that the Psychic typing brings in like the Dark and Ghost, I think is really solid. Just personally, I think that's a little bit better. But I like the Electric, I like the Fire, 2 good typings defensively for Bronzong. I can especially see Terra Fire with like Heat Proof Bronzong being like really, really crazy. Both typings that also benefit from the Levitate ability, which is really, really good. Driftblim with Flying, I think Flying is like just correct. It's just a good typing overall to work with from an offensive standpoint. The Ground is interesting. I assume this mainly for like the defensive purposes of dodging electric type attacks, which I'm all for. And Steel also is just like a good defensive Terra type, especially since it's not typically weak to any of the typings that Steel is weak to. So I think having Terra Steel to be able to completely switch to a different side of like the weaknesses chart, I think is really, really solid. So I think that this is, it's very solid Terra Captains. Also the first person to recognize that like you could have both of your tier 5s as Terra Captains. I think that's really cool. Looking at the rest of the team, I really like a lot of aspects of this. Thwackey, Moltres, and Swampert is Firewater Grass. I'm really a big fan. Thwackey setting up that grassy terrain for his team is going to be really, really good. It actually helps support a lot of things, weakening earthquakes and stuff for a lot of his other ground weak mons, which is really, really solid. And just providing that passive healing is really nice, especially for things like the Galar Slowking. I think that's really, 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 really good. His Fairy Dragon Steel is just 2 mons. Is sort of 2 mons, but kind of 3 mons. He's got the Bronzong as a steel. He also has the Sui and Gudra as a steel. But I think that that's fine because they have completely different weakness spreads. This is one of those cases where like overlapping typings isn't bad because they don't share like any weaknesses unless like Bronzong has Heat Proof and it's weak to ground. Then it's just fine because he's covering that with the grassy terrain. I think that's really good. He's got the Florges here too for Wish Passing. I think that's really, really nice. He's got some good momentum options with like Chilly Reception, Slowking, which will set up that snow and give his Chen Pao defense boost, which Chen Pao was a mon that we discussed and like just barely got its way back in. I'm actually kind of happy to see it back in. I think he's just really, really, really strong. Like, it's insanely strong tier 1. But I don't think it's too broken for draft purposes. I think it's strong enough that, like, you can build a team around it and make a team really strong with it being there, but I don't think it's broken. Cloth with Regenerator is really, really solid. Kind of bulky option. Some good hazard setters, like Swampert and Cloth and Bronzong. Some good sweeping potential. Gudra has been proven in D-League to be a sweeping monster. in the past, as well as, Chen Pao can just set up an SD and just kind of clean up a team, which is really, really interesting, which is really, really solid. I think this is one of the best teams we've seen so far. I would give this team, honestly, a very solid... I'd say this is a very, very solid A. This is a very solid A. I don't really have any real issues with this team. There's nothing that stands out to me as, particularly wrong with it. I don't see anything that makes me, upset. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But I think that looking at the teams, this is one of the ones to beat for sure this season. Greg really, really outdid himself with this draft. I'm really, really excited to see how it turns out for him. Moving on, we have another new person in Jay and his SETX Sneezlers. I assume that's Southeast Texas. I'm guessing. It's my assumption. Very, very cool looking team name. And he's got a solid roster here with the Cinderace, Grimmsnarl, Rotom Wash, Excadrill, Cleavor, Lucario, Overquill, Alolan Exeggutor, Oricorio Sensu, Weirdeer, and Carbink. Carbink with Fairy, Fighting, and Water Terra types, and the Alolan Exeggutor with the Dragon, Fire, and Steel Terra types. So, 2 Terra types that cover for the 4 times weakness to Ice, which I think I really like. Also gets access, I believe, to things like Flamethrower, which is, good to get some stab on with the Fire Terra. I think it's really good for the Exeggutor. Dragon Terra is also just a really good Terra to have on anything. Carbink, Fairy Terra is good because it removes a lot of the excess weaknesses that Rock adds to it. Fighting Terra is good for Body Press, and Water Terra is just a naturally good defensive Terra type. I really, really like the Terra types for his 2 captains. I think that they're really, really good. I can see a lot of good things with those guys. Let's look at his cores. Fairy, Dragon, Steel. He's got the Grimmsnarl. He's got the Exeggutor. He's got Lucario, Excadrill. Really, really good stuff. He also got the Fairy type with Carbink. So he's got a lot of overtype Fairy, Dragon, Steel-wise, which I don't particularly like that much, but I can understand to some extent. Because there's only a little bit of overlap when it comes to weaknesses, but not too much, I guess. The Lucario feels like it could be replaced by something else. Then I would replace Lucario with anything else because I don't like Lucario as a Pokemon. But that's just me. I think it's lackluster. Obviously, his better Steel type, in my opinion, is Excadrill. But that's just me. Cleavor is really, really solid. Being able to just get up rocks pretty freely with the Stone Axes is pretty nice. Overquill is a really, really good mon. Oricorio with Quiver Dance being able to potentially sweep. Weirdeer feels like one of the really good budget low tiers. Just has a lot of really good natural bulk to it. And I feel like that thing is going to get slept on a lot by people. Firewater Grass Core being the Cinderace Rotom Exeggutor I think is really, really solid as well. I do like that core a good bit. Cinderace is just really, really solid with access to Libero. Being able to, we allow Libero now, obviously, because it was nerfed going into this generation because of it only working with the first move you click after coming into battle. That would switch your typing. So, you have to swap to get your Libero back, which is fine. I think that balances it enough to allow it. But that still means it's still really, really strong. You can get that boosted U-turn off. You can get that boosted high jump kick on something. All really, really solid options for this thing. I think that Libero makes it really, really strong. Also having access to Court Change. Being the only one that has access to Court Change for hazard removal, I think is really great. Overall, I think this team's good. I think this team is good. It's not perfect. A lot of the typing overlap kind of screws up some type synergies across the board, but I like what this team can do. I like the potential screens, parting shot options, allowing things like Cinderace, allowing things like Excadrill, allowing things like Kleavor to sweep. One thing that I do have an issue with, and I think maybe there's like a potential Trick Room option in his future. The team has one really, really fast Mon with Cinderace, and then everything else is 90 and below, and that's kind of rough. So, not the biggest fan of that. So far, most of the teams have had overall fairly balanced speed, and even if their base speed wasn't great, they had things that edited it. The Applins have the snow, so obviously Sandslash is getting its speed doubled, so that kind of puts it up above in that high speed tier. Greg's speed tier is pretty solid overall with Chimpouch and Chino, and Unburdened Drifblim being an option as well. But this feels like a really, really rough speed-wise. I'm looking at the other teams. Even the ones that were kind of slow-ish, they still had some good balance across the board. Nice Mons breaking, at least one or two Mons breaking 100, and a bunch of Mons that can really set up and get there. And I'm not really seeing a lot of that with this team. Oricorio Sensu can do it, but it's not obviously ideal. So, it could be better. It could be better, but it could also be worse. I think this team is a solid B. Solid B, I think I would give this one. Because I can see this team doing well. I don't think that a lot of the overlap is going to really hurt it too much. I think that I feel like I can definitely see a lot of routes where this team might go well. I think B- actually. B- feels right. Yeah, that feels right for this team. Moving on, we have the Wugga Wugga Wug Trios, coached by Simon. Simon has been around the community for a while. I believe he is a recent addition to D-League as well. And his team already looking kind of fierce. We have the Archaludon, the Garganacl, Volcarona, Galarian Weezing, Reuniclus, Barraskewda, Blissey, Sableye, Hisuian Electrode, Cryogonal, and the Golem. With Electrode having the Grass, Ice, and Water Terra typings, and Cryogonal with the Ice, Electric, and Poison Terra typings. So, okay, looking at that, obvious has to have Ice, Electric for the no weakness Levitate. Makes a lot of sense there. And then we have, obviously, the Poison. Another one that benefits from the Levitate as well. Plus, this is a bulkier Mon. You might not want to get it Toxic. I can see that scenario. I'm liking the Cryogonal typings. Pretty cool. And then for Hisuian Electrode, going with Grass. I kind of like that. Ice to cover for ground types as well. Pretty much all three of his typings cover for ground typing is really, really nice. And the good defensive typings with water. I think that works really, really nicely for him. I think I would go with Electric over Grass personally, because it's just a better defensive typing. And as the Hisuian one, you're less likely to Terra into a ground move coming in versus Terraing away from an ice or a fire attack coming in at this point, in my opinion. But overall, I think that it's fine. Firewater Grass, he's got the Volcarona, Hisuian Electrode, and the Barraskewda. I think it's a more offensive version of the core, which I don't see any problem with. Also, fastest Subseeder in the game with Electrode, which I think is really cool. Well, I wonder if that's something he will utilize. Fairy Dragon Steel. Pretty bundled version of it. He has the Archaludon and the Weezing to cover that core. which I think is also perfectly fine. Archaludon's an insanely good Pokemon, and Weezing is good to pair with it. The Levitate, dodging, ground moves is really, really good for it. And Neutralizing Gas is a fun ability to have for a bunch of different things. I really, really like this team. It's very balanced. It's one of the few teams so far that is lacking in that doesn't have much type overlap at all. The only overlap that I see is the rock typing with Golem and Garganacl. But I feel like Golem was like just kind of like a filler pick to get ground typing on the team. Not so much like I feel it feels like a filler pick to kind of just make sure he had a ground type, and he was kind of stuck for whatever was available, which I get that. We've all been there. But overall, I think this team is incredibly well constructed. I see like the supportive cast in like Sableye, Blissey, being able to pass wishes or like status a whole bunch of things and really like chip the team down, while things like the Volcarona can sweep late game. Archaludon can just muscle its way through a weakened team very effectively with stamina and like assault vest and stuff like that, and just being a naturally strong beast. Garganacl with Salt Cure being able to just spam that against teams, forcing prep with like covert cloaks and stuff. Like it's a devastating looking mon by itself. Honest to God, this is one of the scariest teams I've seen. Personally, I don't have any issue with this team at all. I think speed-wise, it's very solid. It's got a couple mons over the 100 threshold. And then, like, a couple mons solidly underneath it, you know, not too far off. I think this is a really well-constructed roster. And I think it's something that people should be scared of. I would personally give this a solid A. Maybe A+. I think A+ honestly is not out of the realm of possible. I think I can justify an A+ here. This team is just really, really good. I'm not really seeing any real standout issues with it. I think everything looks incredible. I think everything looks just incredible. This is a really, really well put together team, Simon. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you utilize it. Really, really good stuff, man. And that will conclude what we have for the Boulder division. Moving on, we have the members of the Crown division. Starting out, we have the Gar Champs, coached by Lewis. Lewis has been around for a couple seasons now as well. They've been improving here solidly each and every season, putting out some solid teams and doing some solid work. So let's see how his team turned out this season. We do have the mascot pick with the Garchomp. We have Zapdos, Deoxys Defense, Basculegion, the male version, Galarian, Moltres, Glastrier, Azelf, Vikavolt, Charizard, Flapple, and Murkrow. He has the Charizard with Terra, Fire, Grass, and Ground, and the Flapple with the Terra, Grass, Fairy, and Flying. Okay. I can see that. Grass to power up those grab apples, just give it a nice solid stab. Fairy to kind of dodge opposing dragons, which I think is really nice. Give it also that Fairy type Terra Blast to smack them with. And Flying, I can maybe see. What's the logic for Flying? Still weak to Ice. Flying's good against other grass types. Allows you to break other grass types. Okay, I like that. Okay, I can see the logic there. I'm kind of with it. I've seen Fire be used for Flapple before, so I can see that maybe over Flying, but I can see the logic behind Flying. Charizard keeping its fire typing obviously makes the most sense there. Grass covers for water, gives it super effective on rock types as well, and same with ground is a good defensive thing against rock types, which are going to be a huge threat for Charizard. So I do like those Terra typings. I think that's really, really solid stuff. Firewater Grass with Charizard, Flapple, Basculegion I think is not bad. I don't really have any super issues with that. I think that that's a fine combo. Fairy Dragon Steel, no Steel type. No Steel type on the team. I know they're kind of hard to come by, but that's still not ideal, not having the Steel type there. To pair with your Double Dragon, Garchomp, and Flapple. Ooh. Yeah, that's not ideal. No Fairy either. Ooh. I don't like that. I don't like no Fairy. Means like a dragon spam could kind of rip this whole roster to shreds. Like, the Terra Fairy being your only Fairy option is not good. That's like really just not good. It's a mistake, just in my opinion. Not having a Fairy or a Steel type is really bad on a defensive standpoint for this team. I see that creating issues in team building in the future. Double electric types with the Zapdos and the Vikavolt is not ideal. Even though hilariously neither one is weak to ground. But they do share rock weaknesses, which is not perfect. Does have like some good bulk, like the Moltres, the Deoxys, the Zapdos, all very, very bulky mons. Glastrier is decently bulky. Murkrow creates a ton of scenarios that could be very annoying with like Tailwind and stuff. I could see Tailwind being utilized on this roster. It's kind of put it over the edge. Speed-wise, this roster's kind of solid with speed and stuff. A lot of ways to modulate their speed, as well as like limit the opposing team's speed as well. I think that all can be really, really good. But I think there's just some fundamental team building issues with some of the decisions made with mons that were drafted. A lot of double ups that don't really feel necessary. I could see some scenarios where this team gets caught with its pants down. Something like just a really strong dragon type clicking Outrage, and you don't really have a switch in for that. Like that's kind of scary. You have to bring Terra Fairy and like sack something to get the Flapple in safely, which is not particularly ideal. You don't really want to have to do things like that. So I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think this team is still in the solid C range, because it does have like the bulk, it does have, a decent Firewater Grass core, but I think the C- E team is just not really like, I'm not really feeling it. Just personally, I think there's some improvements that could be made. I think the acquiring a proper Fairy type and a proper Steel type, just from a defensive standpoint, would increase the quality of this team dramatically. I think right now you can throw a Pebble at this team with all the rock weaknesses, and it kind of falls apart. There's a lot of birds, a lot of flying types, a lot of rock weak. It seems kind of rough. C- is as low as I typically like to go. I don't like to go too far deep. But this is a team that's like bordering pushing out of that. It has the bones to be good. It has like basic structure of being decent. So yeah, I definitely see like there's a lot of improvements that can be made to this team. It has the bones of something good, but I'm not quite sure it's there. But who knows? We'll see what happens. Moving on, we have the Grind City Gale Wings, which is a rename of the Memphis Brave Birds, coached by our wonderful founder, James. James is back once again. He is in D-League this season, and he is piloting a team with Great Tusk, Wellspring Ogrepon, the Dragonite Monkey Dory, Hisuian Arcanine, the Regieleki, Sinistcha, Alolan Persian, Copper Alcremie, and the Spidops. Looking at this team, I am really liking it. Firewater Grass Core is looking like the Arcanine, Ogrepon, and Sinistcha. A little bit overlap, obviously, with the grass typings, but I think, like, Ogrepon feels more like a water type than it does grass type, I think. Especially with the water absorb and everything like that. So very, very solid looking core there. Not too big of a deal. And Hisuian Arcanine does cover for the shared. A lot of the shared weaknesses that come from both being grass types. So that's kind of good. Fairy Dragon Steel, we have the Alcremie, we have the Copper and we have the Dragonite. So that's pretty solid core there. I don't really have any issues with that. I think Great Tusk is an amazing mod to build a team around. It's natural, crazy bulk, plus removal, plus now having access to booster energy, I think is really, really good for it. These mods can be very, very threatening. Things like Persian provide a lot of good support here. Spidops with webs makes this team very, very scary. Because like he already has some good speed tiers options going with it, but if you can get webs up, that makes the ability to run things like Adamant Ogrepon, Modest Monkey Dory, all very, very possible and very, very dangerous. I think this team's really, really good. I think this team has potential to go really far. I don't really have too many issues with this team. I think this is a solid, just A team. I don't really genuinely have too many problems with it, aside from like maybe it feels a little bit too offensive. Like even like the bulkier things aren't like the bulkiest. So like that's my main issue, is just the team feels a little bit more offensive than bulky. It's kind of missing some very solid bulky elements. So that's what's keeping it from being like an A+, but I think this is like a solid A minus kind of roster. Because of that, in that range, it's kind of like teeters between it. Honestly, depending on the day, I might switch up between A or A minus on this one. His Terra Captains being Copper and Alcremie, with Steel, Flying, Water, and then Fairy, Fire, and Ground, respectively. I can see some good things there. Ground to cover for like its typical weaknesses. It gives it offensive Terra Blast to pop this Poison and Steel types coming for it, which is really cool. Fire as well for a defensive option against Steel. Really, really solid. Flying as a defensive option against Ground. And Fighting for the Steel typing, which is really good. And then Water is just a naturally good defensive typing. I think that's really, really solid. Yeah, I think this is like solid. Literally, depending on the day, I can teeter between A and A minus. I think I lean a little bit more towards A, because I think like the Terra types are really, really good here. I think this team does a lot of things really, really solidly. But I wish it had more bulk options. I wish it had more bulk options, which is why I do. I'm gonna solidly say A minus because I wish this team had more bulk. But I do like the team. I like the way it looks. I like the way I think things are going to work well together. I think this is a really good roster. James, you did a good job. Moving on, we have the Infernal Blazers, coached by Colin. Colin is back once again with the Infernal Blazers. He's been around for, I think, a couple seasons now, if I remember correctly. That's a name that I recognize for a little bit. He drafted a team of Landorus Therian, Scizor, Superior, Porygon Z, Conkeldurr, Dragalge, Mimikyu, Jolteon, Rhydon, Houndoom, and the Mightyena. Mightyena feels, honestly, like it was probably a filler pick, personally. I think that's probably likely. Unless he just really likes Mightyena, which is also totally fine. Dark, Ghost, and Poison for the Houndoom. I think Ghost to cover for... Ghost to cover for its fighting weakness. Okay, that makes sense. Poison because it does have Poison Stab with Sludge Bomb. I think I could see that. I can see that logic there. And then Dark is just like the most spammable stab on the team, so on this mon. So I think that makes sense for Houndoom. Ground, Electric, and Steel on the Rhydon. Ground is just better than Rock, especially just clicking Earthquake. Electric, I can just the one weak change it to just having one weakness. Right, it's a weakness that it does share with Electric, but nonetheless. I'm interested to see the reasoning there. I think probably just because of the one weakness. And Steel as well, like good defensive typing. I just don't know if it was good defensive typing for Rhydon. I think Rhydon would probably benefit more from like a Terra Water, personally, but that's just me. I think this team's fine. Just fine. We're missing a water type, which I don't like that at all. I don't like we're missing a water type. Just leaving. I think water type is one of those typings you just absolutely should have on a team because of its lack of weaknesses and just overall, like, most water types provide a lot of utility for teams. I think missing out on that and not even having a Terra Water as an option is kind of not good. Fairy Dragon Steel Core looks really solid with the Mimikyu, Scizor, and the Dragalge. I think that's a really, really good core. I really, really do like that a lot. Scizor is really solid. I think get a good mix of solid, like physical and special options for the team. I think it's really, really nice. I can see like a decent bit of bulk here. Dragalge's good. A good Bulkamon. Scizor can be decently bulky. Lando's bulky. Conk's bulky. But it's a very bulky offensive team. In a sense. I think I would probably give this team more of like a B-. There's not a lot of overlap happening here, which I do like. I like any scenario where I can see a team that's constructed without overlapping too many typings. And like, even if the typings are overlapped, they don't harm the situation too poorly. I think Lando and Rhydon overlapping isn't ideal, but I think it's also fine because they do cover for that a little bit. With the Houndoom, with the Scizor, with the Conk being good to cover for like the ice weaknesses, Superior to cover for the water weakness and stuff like that. So I think that it's overall like not terrible. But I think B- still, because I think like missing out on a water type is really, really bad. I think having a water type is really crucial for a really solid team. I think some of his Terra type choices could have been better, especially on the Rhydon. Obviously, I think Mightyena is just kind of a filler pick. I don't really see Mightyena coming to a lot of games. It's just kind of there. So overall, I think like this team has potential. But I definitely think that there's definitely still room to improve. And then moving on, we are on to the last team in the Crown Division, and it is the Xanarkand Zoroarks, coached by Stuart. Another late addition. I believe we had someone drop very close to the start of things, very close to the start of the draft. You know, it is what it is. It's a thing that happens sometimes. What can you do? But Stuart has been a member of the community for a good bit, so like He's well known around the community, and overall, I think he is a really, really solid player. From what I have experienced with him, he's a really, really solid player, and I very much expect him to go far. His team consists of the Annihilate, Hisuian Zoroark, the Weavile, the Ribombee, Entei, Donphan, Rotom-Mow, Umbreon, Comfey, Squawkabilly, and the Golduck. Let's look at his Terra Captains first and foremost. We have the Squawkabilly with the Terra Normal, Terra Fighting, and Terra Ground. Ground for Electric type coverage, which is good. Normal because of it obviously being stab, but also boosted facades is just terrifying. And then Fighting, I can see with like the reversal set that's really, really strong. I can see that being very, very threatening. I'm very much a big fan of that. Then we also have the Comfey with Fairy. Obviously, it's a stab, but it's very, very good for it. It sets up Calm Minds, gets up that stab Draining Kiss. Really, really dangerous. We have the Steel typing, which is just good to cover for typical weaknesses, and Water is just a good defensive typing overall. I really like the Terra types on his Terra Captains. I think they're really, really good. Looking at his team, we got a Firewater Grass core of Entei, Rotom-Mow, and Golduck. Obviously, Golduck is not ideal to have as your water type, but I think it can still do the job. Having access to Cloud9, when I know there are like one or two there's at least one other weather team running around, one or two weather teams running around. I think having access to Cloud9 does benefit him in that sense, as he does have that little tech to bring to kind of shut down some of that weather nonsense. So, kind of fan of that. Double Dark type with Umbreon and Weavile, but they do very different things, which is crucial. He also does have Double Ghost with Annihilate and Zoroark Hisui, but they don't share any weaknesses because of their secondary typings, which is also very, very crucial. I think that actually could be a very smart bring on his part with the Zoroark, being able to could potentially disguise the Zoroark as the Annihilate. Someone goes for like a ghost move to try to take out the Annihilate, but then Zoroark obviously being immune and then being able to smack their ghost right back with its own ghost move, I think could be very, very dangerous. I think this combination, this pair right here, actually, the fact that they're both ghost types is really, really, really good for it. I see that being really, really solid. I think Hisuian Zoroark is really good on this team. I think there's a lot of scenarios where, like, disguise this Weavile, dodge a fighting attack, smack it back real hard. That's another option as well. Disguise as Umbreon, smack him back real hard. I think this thing can play a really, really strong role for this team. I think the addition of webs with Ribombee is also terrifying. Some good removal. I think this is another solid A+. I think this is an A+ team. I really don't have any major issues with this roster. I think the more I look at it, the more I can see the synergies working here. Like, obviously, the double dark type isn't ideal, but they do very different things. They probably will rarely come into the same matchup, unless, like, the opposing team is lacking in ways of dealing with dark types, which, like, having a good defensive option and offensive option would be good there. This is one of those few cases where overlap isn't terrible if on a team that works well with it. So I think overall, I think this team's not bad. I think this team's is incredible. I really expect Stuart to do incredibly well with this roster. I can't see a world where he doesn't. So yeah, we're a really, really great team, Stuart. Really well done, and looking forward to seeing how you utilize it. Now we move on to our final roster, and let me see if this works appropriately. We have the Fire Division, and yes, it worked exactly how I wanted it to. Hooray. Starting out the Fire Division, we have Alyssa and her Long Island Lipards. Alyssa is married to another one of our commissioners, in Alex, and she is a lovely human being. She's also providing a prize to the eventual winners of both leagues. She does dolls on the side as a side hustle. Let me actually pull up the name of her thing so that I can properly promote her, because I think that that's only fair, because she deserves it, because she is awesome for this. Let me see if I can find it. This is how you know I'm never prepared for anything. Okay. She goes by Venom and Blossom on Instagram and Etsy. You can go check it out. She does dolls of various characters and whatnot, which I think is really, really cool. I will make sure to link her stuff in the description of the video. I'll actually make a note to do that. But she's done a bunch of video game characters, anime characters. She's done some stuff from Danganronpa. Stuff from Final Fantasy, also really cool. She also does commissions, which is also awesome. We love people who do commissions. Very, very cool stuff. And like they're very cute. They're very good quality. Yeah, I think her stuff's really, really high quality. Definitely check her out. If you see anything you like, go for it. Feel free to reach out to her for commissions. She's offered to commission a doll for the winners of both Main and D League, which is really, really cool. So I think that is awesome. Let's see how her draft turned out. You can see little bits of who probably discussed helping her draft a little bit as well. As she's obviously married to Alex and close with Cece. We see the Sneasler, very CC inspired. We had Dragon, the Raikou, the Sylveon, the Alex family lineage carries on here, which is very lovely. This is the staple of that home, of course. It has to be there. The Espathra, the Clodsire, Registeel, Inteleon, Serena, Camerupt, and Swanna. We have Terra Captains in Serena and Camerupt. Serena being Grass, Fairy, and Water. I really like that. Water covers for its fire weakness. Fairy is good defensive typing. And Grass, obviously, it just kind of has to take Grass, but I think it works really well for it. With that boosted Power Whips. And then Camerupt with Fire, Grass, and Water. Some good defensive typings for it across the board. Will also be really good with its solid rock ability to be able to switch to typings like that. I think it's really, really solid. Looking over the team as a whole, I do see a lot of things I do like. I think speed-wise, this is one of a really, really well-constructed team. A lot of speeds above 100. A lot of things that get fast really quickly. Some really, really good bulk. Clodsire, Sylveon, Registeel, Serena, all very, very bulky. The Swanna kind of feels like it's just there. It does provide like the flying typing, which is really good, but it just kind of feels there. Is it there for defog purposes, I wonder? Let me look into that out of curiosity. Does Swanna have defog? It does have defog, so it is a defogger for the team, which is good. I do like that. Okay, that makes sense. Pair with Serena for spin. I think that's fine. It's justifiable. Really good mix of solid physical and special offense, although I think the physical side is lacking a little bit. Like, Sneasler's the main physical attacker, and then, like, your other physical things are, like, Serena and Registeel and Clodsire, which isn't great. A little bit more physical offense wouldn't hurt. I think overall I really like this team. I see a lot of good mons here. I see a lot of things that apply a lot of pressure. I see some really strong offensive options. I see a lot of strong defensive options. I think overall this team is like a solid, I think A-, I would say. I think like the lack of more physical offense kind of weakens this team a little bit. In my eyes, I think probably still A. I think lacking physical offense doesn't like kill this team, actually. I think it's just solid A on the dot. I will go with for this team as my final grade. It's a really, really well constructed team. I think obviously like she's, you know, got close ties to multiple really solid members of the community. And I think overall, like, they work together on building their teams and, like, discussing their builds. And I think the Brain Trust really, really put together a good one here. I really like what they have here. Next up, we have the Memphis River Kingdras, coached by Matthew. With the Golden Go, Sui and Samurott, Rillaboom, Primarina, Sandy Shocks, Talonflame, Uxie, Toxicroak, Gligar, Berserker, and Glalie. Matthew's been around for a good long while. He's been in, I think, probably since the beginning of D-League, honestly. I feel like he's been here for a very long time, which is very, very cool to see someone stick around with us for so long. Looking at his team, he has Gligar and Glalie as Terra Captains. Gligar with the Flying, Steel, and Water. Good defensive typings overall. I think those are both fine for him. They go with cover for its main weakness in Ice, which is really good. I think that's overall pretty fine. And then Glalie with the Ice, Ghost, and Ground. The Ghost covers for its fighting weakness. Ground, I believe... Ground, I feel, is more of an offensive option, as it does get the Earthquake. But I believe it's just Ground doesn't share any weaknesses as well with Glalie normally, so that also does kind of help. It's also super effective against a lot of things that it's weak to, in like Fire, Rock, Steel, stuff like that. So that's really, really good. Okay, I do like those typings overall. Looking at the rest of the roster, honestly, I don't really have any issues with a lot of what I'm seeing. Double Water type, not ideal, but obviously these two are doing very different things. I feel like there's a lot of situations where both probably won't come. Hisuian Samurott is really great. Ceaseless Edge is just such a good move to click. It's just such a spammable move to click, and I'm a huge fan of that. I think it's very, very solid. Primarina is also a really good mon. Rillaboom is crazy strong, setting up that grassy terrain. They had to nerf its signature attack, which was why it was so good, and it's still solid. And then Talonflame is a good fire type for that core. I think it's really, really, really solid stuff there. Primarina covering the Fairy typing with Golden Go and Steel typing. No Dragon type, which is obviously not ideal, but I think that's like, in my eyes, like, obviously having the full Fairy Dragon Steel core is good, but I think that, like, if you can't get it, Dragon is the one you can miss out on, because Steel is just so good defensively. Obviously, like, it's one of the better defensive typings. Like it's a must-have, I think. And then Fairy is just one of the best typings in the game, period. So having that immunity to Dragon and stuff is really good. I think Dragon, like, it's a really good typing to have, but it's one that, like, if you can't get a good enough one, you're probably fine without it. I think. That's my thought process there. I think overall it's fine. I think this team looks this looks decently good. I think it could be a little bulkier. I think it's missing a lot of bulk. I think like one other thing above base 100 wouldn't hurt speed-wise either. You know, you're jumping from Sandy Shocks up to Talonflame, which isn't ideal. I think overall this team is not bad. I think this team is really, really fine. I don't really have too many problems with it. I think like a little bit of type overlap here and there isn't. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst version of it. I think this is a solid like B team. I think this team has a lot of good things going for it. I think with a few minor tweaks, I think this team can be like really, really scary, really, really good. So I think like, overall, I think this team, you know, can put in some good work, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Matthew does with it. Next up, we have the Rowlett Trailblazers, coached by Aaron. He's a former main league coach, got brought down to D League, former coach of the Houston Toros. And let's see what Aaron's team has put together for us. He's got the Roaring Moon, the Gengar, Gliscor, Torkoal, Slitherwing, Cloyster, Venusaur, Orthworm, Delphox, Crabominable, and the Granbull. Terra Captains are the Delphox with Fire, Electric, and Fairy. Fire is a really solid typing to have just stab-wise to click. With the Terra Boost is really good. Electric is interesting. Takes away, gives it like the offensive coverage for water. I think it's really, really interesting. Okay. And then Fairy is just a good defensive typing overall. Not a bad typing to have. For Crabominable, we have Fighting, Fairy, and Ghost. Ghost will help dodge other fighting types coming into it. Fighting is just a good stab to click for it, which is also really good. And then we have the Fairy as, again, like it's a really solid defensive typing to have. I think the Terra types are really fine for this. Looking at the roster as a whole, Fairy Dragon Steel we do have with the Granbull, Orthworm, and Roaring Moon. I think having one of the members of your core having an immunity like the Orthworm is really, really solid. This being like a really strong Sun team is really, really scary. Really, really well-designed Sun team here. With the Torkoal setting up that Sun. Delphox being a Terra captain with Terra Fire is really, really strong. And then Venusaur being able to utilize the Sun with its Chlorophyll, as well as Slitherwing and Roaring Moon getting the photosynthesis boosts off of it. Cloyster as a water type is really, really good. Really crazy good physical wall. Very physically bulky team overall, actually. This team does not like special hits, like, at all. Does not like special attackers one bit. Definitely something that's not ideal. But overall, I think this is an incredibly strong offensive team with some really good defensive backbones like Gliscor, the physical defense from Torkoal and Cloyster, and Orthworm. Granbull with Intimidate as well. Like, if you're a physical attacker, don't even bother showing up against this team. This team is gonna swallow your physical hits like nothing. It's gonna be really hard to punch through this team physically. I think this is a solid A. I mean, I don't really have any issues with this roster. I think it's really good. I think it's really well put together. I think this is an incredibly strong Sun team. I think a really strong variation of a Sun team. I don't really have any qualms with what we're seeing here. I think this is really good. I mean, overall, I think Aaron put together a really crazy good roster. I'm really big fan of this. Good luck to you, Aaron. Looking forward to seeing what you do this season. It's going to be a crazy one, I'm sure. And I think you're going to do exceptionally. And then last but not least, we have Callum and the Victory Bells. He earned his way up to Maine for a season and then dipped back down. It's going to happen every now and then. It is what it is. But he's looking to earn his way back up, and he has got a pretty solid roster looking like here. He's got the Terapagos, the Thunderous Incarnate, the Clefable, Slowking, Duraludon, Pecharunt, Heracross, Smeargle, Victory Bell. Oh, another mascot pick. I love that. Sandslash, and the Glaceon. Alright. Looking at the Terra Captains, we have Victory Bell with Grass, Fire, and Normal. Okay. I'm not really sure about the Normal. I'm not really sure what Victory Bell would do with the Normal. Not really entirely certain on that one. What does Victory Bell get in its move pool? Am I missing something crucial here? Not really seeing anything that's standing out as like, yeah, no, this is definitely something that like normal typing would help us with. I mean, I suppose it just takes away like most of its weaknesses, which is kind of interesting. Fire, I could see though, if like he gets Sun going for this team at any point in time, I could see it being really good, or just giving him like that good defensive option against other fire types, also not bad. And then Grass is just a good first stab typing for it. And Glaceon, Ice obviously it has to have, with the Ghost covering for fighting, and Water just being a good defensive typing. I think those Terra types are overall fine. I'm curious about the normal one. I'm really curious as to the reasoning for that. If you feel free, let me know. I'm just curious, but overall, I think it looks fine. We are missing a proper fire type for the team, so that core is incomplete. Missing that piece of it at least. And then we have the... we have Fairy Dragon Steel between Clefable and Duraludon. Duraludon with the EVLA is actually really, really crazy good. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he utilizes that. Pecharunt I've seen recently is a crazy physical wall. Does a lot better than you would expect it to. So I'm curious to see how he'll utilize this mon. I just want to see it utilized more, so I'm very excited about that. And then I'm looking over at the rest of the team, just like a lot of solid offensive options, some good bulk overall. It's not bad. Smeargle creates good support network as well. Can bring a lot of things. Excuse me. It's a little late for me at the moment. But Smeargle provides a lot of good support for this team. Already has a lot of really good bulk to it, really good power to it. Terapagos as well is a really strong mon. Has a removal, it provides setup, potential sweeping options, and just an insanely wide move pool that's absolutely just crazy to work with. So I think overall, this team looks really, really strong. I think this is actually another A roster for me. I don't really have any particularly standout issues with this team. I think it looks really, really good. And I think that Callum is going to utilize it incredibly well. I really, really like everything that's going on here. I'm really excited to see this team operate. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for D-League. For D-League's draft analysis. I'm very, very excited about this season for D-League. Season 13. Can't believe we've run 13 seasons of this. This is insane. And it's just kept going, and we've seen changes in leadership, we've seen evolutions, devolutions, we've seen a lot of ups and downs for D-League. I think we're finally heading in a good direction. We have two great people running it in Alan and Greg. Greg creating these amazing docs for us, and Alan has a real passion for running D-League that is really showing through. He's really pushing for D-League to get that proper equal representation, and for D-League to get that proper spotlight and care given to it that Main League normally receives. And I really, really love that mindset. I really love the way that he's approaching things. with D-League this season. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all turns out. I'm a huge fan of it. I really want to see D-League thrive, and I think we have the right people running it, and a really good crop of coaches here right now, showing us there's a lot of talent down here, a lot of potential in a lot of the people here. People have been down here for a while, learning, growing, improving, and that's what D-League's here for. That's what it is meant to be. So I'm very, very excited to see this season. I'm so stoked for it. I can't wait to do the recaps going forward. I'm going to try to obviously do those every single week. Obviously, sometimes there might be delays when it comes to games that might be extended. We're gonna discuss how we're gonna handle that. We might just leave those games off and then just do a quick recap of what happened with that game in the following week's recap or whatever. We'll discuss and figure out how we're gonna go about that. But I'm really excited to get back into doing content again for the NPBF channel. I'm really excited about it. I think that I think it's been very much missed. I think it's been something that people have been really clamoring for, and I can't wait to bring it to you guys. So that's going to be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the NPBF channel. We're going to try our best to keep content rolling really solidly this season. We have a really good group of people that are very invested in getting this done. So we're going to do our very best to maintain it for you guys to the very best of our abilities. So thank you guys so much. My name is Jeff, head of the NPBF, signing off. Peace.